Sorry for that. Let me just okay. Sige, so going back, general controls are those that are applicable to the entire computer information system network. Okay. So this pertains to all activities involving a firm's CIS activities and resources. The purpose of these controls is to establish a framework of overall control over the CIS activities and to provide a reasonable assurance that the overall objectives of internal controls are achieved. So these controls are applicable regardless of the computer that you are using, regardless of the software that you are using. So this is applicable to all. No, general siya. General iyang application. So, examples of general controls as group, we have organizational or personal controls. You have organizational independence, independent review, segregation of duties. Okay. So later, what I will discuss in detail are those 5 major groups that are included in the AICPA manual. Ato lang na siyang pagian. And then document controls, we have policies and procedures, diagrams, example, your data flow diagrams. Then asset accountability controls, we have human resources, planning process, audit, management, and operational controls. We have information center operations controls. We have the diagnostic programs, disaster recovery plans, hardware controls. We also have authorization controls and access controls. But what I want you to familiarize, if dili makayo memorize, at least familiarize, are the following. Kaning 5 categories of general controls. So, sa ato ang mind, if we speak of general controls, dapat klaro nga, when we say general controls, applicable ni siya sa tanan computers nga ni comprise sa ato ang computerized information system. So we have 5. Organization and operation controls, system development and documentation controls, hardware and system software controls, access controls, and data and procedural controls. So let's look at these controls one by one. Okay, so first we have here, on the first column are our general controls. Second column is our controls that are related to the specific controls that are related to these controls. And as auditors, unsa man ato ang pwede gamiton nga test of controls. Okay, first we have organization and operation controls. Organization and operation. So mo nang relevant kayo diri ang ato ang organization chart. So dapat ang kaninga person, ang kaninga task, kung gi-designate ni siya ani nga person, siya ra gyud dapat ang mo-perform ana. Dili pwede ipa-perform sa lain. So ang pag-organize sa atong employees, pag-organize sa tasks sa kana nga mga employees, and ang ato ang overall operation. So ang controls nga dapat buhaton ni client ani. So again, ang kaning controls nga second column, this is the responsibility of the audit client. So si client mismo ang mubuhat ani. Ang kaning test of controls is kita as auditors unsaon nato pag-test kung naa ba jud ni nga mga controls nila, or if naa, na-follow ba siya properly. Okay, so under organization and operation controls, we have segregate functions between the IT department and user departments. So for big organizations, na sila separate IT department. Same with USC, di ba, na atay own IT department. And then user departments, mo na ang mga various departments that uses the software, that uses the computers. We call them user departments. So dapat lahi sila. Ang mo develop sa system, dili dapat mao ang mo gamit sa system. Correct? Do not allow the IT department to initiate or authorize transactions. Kaya ang maka-input ra og transactions dira, ang maka-process og transactions, maka-generate og reports, dapat ang katong mga employees sa ato ang user departments. So unsa ram day role sa IT department? Ang role lang sa IT department is to develop the system, uh, to conduct system maintenance, troubleshooting, no? If ikaw user ka sa software, unya na kay problema sa pag-access, na kay ganahan ipa-void nga transaction. So, diha na mosud ang ato ang IT department, but they cannot initiate, ang IT department, they cannot initiate or authorize transactions. Okay? Then segregate functions within the IT department itself. So that's why if you look at the IT department of the University of San Carlos, inigsod ni mo dira sa IRM, di ba lain-lain man sa tasks ang mga tao dinha. So naapoy dapat segregation of functions within the IT department itself. So kita as auditors, how can we test the control of the internal controls of the client with respect to organization and operation controls? We do it through inquiry. Maghatag ka og question and answer nga kuan baron, questionnaire. Nadira pansira nimo. Then observation, we observe how they do it in the client's premises. Discussion, especially with the heads of the departments. So makig-discuss kanila, unsa di ay buhaton ninyo ani. Then you also have to review the organization chart. Then for another general control, we have systems development and documentation controls. So the internal controls that should be implemented by our audit clients are the following. User departments must participate in systems design. Again, this is on the systems development. And saon pag-develop sa system, pag-document sa procedure. So user departments must participate in the systems design. Nga naman, because ang kaning IT department nato, dili magud sila ka imagine kung unsa jud imong kailangan sa imong department. So for example, payroll department ka, di man maka-imagine si IT department nga kailangan kag mga inani nga columns ha sa ako ang payroll report. So you as part of the user department should participate in the systems design so that you can also communicate your requirements to the IT department. Nga ganahan ko nga ang among department maka-generate og inani nga report. Ganahan ko nga ang entry ang fields ini-input na ko sa data na ay inani. So you need to be able to participate. Each system must have written specifications which are reviewed and approved by management and by user departments. Both users and IT personnel must test new systems. If bago lang ni gi-implement nga system, kailangan na sa testing phase before siya operational na gyud. Management, users, and IT personnel must approve new systems before they are placed into operation. After a new system is operating, there should be proper approval for all program changes. So once the system is already in place, if you propose a change in the system, there should be proper approval. I think obvious man sad Miss Yano. Then proper documentation standards should exist to assure continuity of the system. So for example, if the original IT experts that developed the system mo retire na or mo resign na, kailangan na sila documented procedures dira para sa katong mga bag-o nga mga IT employees, IT experts, kung need na nila na i-change sa system, at least kebalo sila asa sila musugod no na ay continuity of the system. And then we have hardware and systems software controls. Control features inherent in the computer hardware, operating system, and other supporting software and ensure that they are utilized to the maximum possible extent. So the hardware itself, when we say hardware, the physical component ba? The monitor, the things that you can touch, the monitor, the keyboard, the CPU, mo na siya ang hardware. And system software, katong gipang install sa imong hardware. These components have their own inherent control features. So dapat gamiton sa jud na siya sa ato ang audit client to the maximum possible extent. So us as auditors, If we want to perform tasks of controls with respect to this general control, we should determine whether the controls are functioning as intended. And how do we do it? Later, we will learn kung unsaon. Then, access controls. In general, kaning access controls is we restrict access. We restrict access to our computer, to this software, to this module. So it could be no na. For example, naka-install mo SAP sa inyong laptop. Okay, ikaw na aka sa sales department. Unya, dito pod sa payroll department, napod sila ilang kaugalingon nga laptop nga naa pod diray SAP Business One. Maka-imagine man mo SAP Business One, no? So if you open SAP Business One, makikita mo sa left side, daghan man nag-modules, correct? Remember mo sa modules, so narito yung mga sales, module, property, plant, and equipment, and so on. So if your task is only related to sales, dapat dili ka maka-access sa uban modules. So dapat naapod na siya nga control in place sa ato ang clients. Dapat ma-restrict niya ang mga employees kung unsa ra nga mga aspects sa information system ang ma-access niya. So that's basically access control. Okay, so us as auditors, how do we test this? We test by attempting to violate the system. So mura taog magduwa ba? If ako'y payroll employee ko, maka-change ba ko sa inventory, sa balance sa inventory? Supposedly dili, di ba? Eh dili man na part sa akong function. So if ikaw si auditor, mo try ka o violate the system, and if mo go through ang imong erroneous transaction, then you could say nga weak ang ilang internal control with respect to access controls. And then data and procedural controls. There should be a written manual of systems and procedure prepared for all computer operations and should provide for management's general or specific authorization to process transactions. So this is more of the documentation side. So us as auditors, how do we test this? Through identification, observation, and inquiry. So those 5, remember those 5? Sumaw na siya to ang general controls. So kana gibalik na dito. Next are our application controls. So kung si general control applicable sa tanan, si application controls applicable lang siya to specific systems or to specific aspects of the system. So this pertains directly to the transaction processing systems. The purpose is to establish specific control procedures over the application systems in order to provide reasonable assurance that all transactions are authorized and recorded and are processed completely, accurately, and on a timely basis. So if sa general controls, we have 5. In application controls, we have 3. 3 only: input, process, output. Input, process, output. Tulo ra ka buok sa application controls. But let's look at these controls one by one. So input controls, these are designed to provide reasonable assurance that transactions are properly validated and authorized before being processed by the computer. So meaning, pag sugod pa lang daan, before ka mag-input dira, dapat authorized na siya nga transaction. Input ha, so meaning, the encoding of the data. Ikaw mismo, pag-encode mo dira sa data, pag-initiate nimo ang transaction, dapat authorized. Transactions are accurately converted into machine-readable form and recorded in the computer data files. So for example, na kay nadawat nga bill from a supplier, diba? Papel, imo nadawat. Imo man siyang i-translate into something nga is i-encode mo siya sa imong system. So dapat accurate pod ang imong pagbutang dito. Name sa supplier dapat accurate. Number of units or quantity dapat accurate sad. Ang purchase price dapat accurate sad. Ang pag-translate nimo of the data nga gikan sa papel, pag-translate nimo dito sa computer dapat accurate pod. Transactions are not lost, added, duplicated, or improperly changed. Most of the time, naagi mga duplications. Okay, for example, nakalimot ka nga na human na din mo encode. So gi-encode na po nimo siya balik. So dapat ang atong system maka-detect nga duplicate naman ni siya. So dapat dili na niya dawaton nga gi-encode nimo. Incorrect transactions are rejected, corrected, and if necessary, resubmitted on a timely basis. Okay, so these are our examples of input controls. We have the use of pre-numbered documents. For example, kung sales invoice, kung mag-input kag sales invoice or let's say purchase order, naka-pre-number na siya tanan. So magsugod jud for example of 001. Sunod, next nimo input 002 na. Next 003, 004. Kung ikaw auditor ka, mag-audit ka sa purchase transactions nila, tan-aw nimo ang pagsunod-sunod sa mga POs. If na missing nga PO dira, let's say, uy, ni diretso lagi 005 gikan sa 003. Unsa di ay ang nahitabo sa 004. So, unsa may nahitabo? So, imong i-investigate. Let's say, nawala ang 004 because givoid manggod siya. Givoid siya. So, next na po nimong query, sakto ba nga i-void siya basin erroneous lang to ang pagka-void ato niya. So mo na ang use of pre-numbered documents. Then keeping blank forms under lock and key. For example, ang blanko nga checkbook nimo. Checkbook. Swatanan sa imong kanang cheque ba? Mag-issue kag cheque, di ba naman kay checkbook. Nya inig-issue nimo ana, di ba tanggalon nimo, ihatag nimo, mahabilin didto ang uban nga wala pa na fill-upan. Nya na may usahay nga gisignature na nadaan, design na nadaan pero blanco ang payee, blanco ang amount. So gisign na nadaan, risky kaayo siya. No kay if makawat na imong checkbook, pwede ra fill-upan didto ang name, amount. Yan na may signature daan. So you need to keep blank forms under lock and key. Restrict access to those blank forms. And then, for online computer systems, you offer the following features. Menu screens. Kana bang user-friendly na lang siya nga screen. Igtanaw nimo kay baw na ka unsa i-input diri dapita, unsa i-input diri dapita. Pre-formatted screens. So for example, if we want to input a new sales invoice, pag tan-aw nimo sa screen, nana din ni field din nga name of the client. So you have to input the name of the client. And then, unsa nga product iyang gipalit. So, input po ni Madera. Quantity. Murag, i-guide na mo ba kung unsay dapat ninyo i-input sa ato ang system. Scanners that read barcodes or other pre-printed documents to reduce input errors. So you can see this in supermarkets. Diba? I-scan na lang nila ang barcode. They do not need to encode it manually. So that would also help reduce input errors. Feedback mechanisms such as confirmation slip to approve a transaction. So if nag-process kag transaction, makita nimo dira sa imong screen nga confirmed, mao ni ang details nga imong gi-input. Confirm ba nimo or dili? If nay sayo, i-edit. Okay? So those are examples of input controls with respect to data observation and recording. Then for data transcription, this is for batching and converting. Ang pinakasikat diri kay kaning hash totals. Hash totals. So for example, if mag-issue ka og cheque in by batch, di ba naman yung mga check number? So ang kaning hash totals, dili ni siya mo make sense. Meaning, dili ni siya, ang total nimo dili amount, dili kwarta. Kung kag total sales mo make sense man ang total niya, di ba? But kung kag total sa check numbers mo make sense ba siya dili? Di man, di ba? Di man siya mo make sense kay total nimong check numbers wala kay info nga makuha ana. But for control purposes, sometimes we do hash totals. I-add na for example tanan check numbers sa check nga atong gi-issue for that day, and then later on i-recheck kung sakto pa ba ang hash total. Kay if na discrepancy sa hash total, that means a specific check was lost in the process. Diba? So mo na ang importance of doing hash totals. And then key verification, visual verification. validity check. So for example, if the field requires you to input whether this person is a male or a female, input M for male, input F for female. If imong i-input T kay transgender or B kay bisexual, dapat dawaton sa system. So we call it validity check. The system itself checks for the validity of the inputted data. Then limit check. So for example, nag-input ka ron dira og number of hours nga gitrabaho sa imong employee para maka-compute ka sa ihang sweldo. Dapat dili mo exceed og 40 hours. So kung naka-input ka dira 50, dili siya dapat dawaton sa ato ang computer or sa atong system. Then reasonableness check. Example, increase in salary is reasonable compared to the base salary. So if you implemented salary increase for the year, si system mag-compute siya og porsyento sa increase. So for example, this is a 20% increase. So mag-check siya sometimes if masayop ka og input sa new salary niya, mo prompt na si system nga are you sure nga mao ni ang bag-o nga salary because this is 200% over and above the base salary. So at least maka-check ka kung sakto ang imong na-input. Then field check. Example, numbers do not appear in fields reserved for words. Example, for date. Date nga, dili date sa Valentine's Day ha. Mamantay ka date. Date sa kaning sales invoice. Dapat numbers ra gyud na dira. So for example, 02-14-22. If mag-type ka dira og letters, dapat dili niya i-accept. So man siya ang field check. Or same goes vice versa. So for example, if dapat letters lang ang encode dito, dapat dili siya mo dawat og numbers. Example, sa name nga field, name of the client. If i-input dito na ay Mary Ann 123. So dapat dili na niya i-accept nga input because it includes something that is not a valid input dira sa kanang field. Sequence check, successive input data are in some prescribed order. So eto siyang i-relate dito sa mga pre-numbered documents. So dapat sunod-sunod gyud siya. If na missing, dapat mo prompt na si ato ang system. Then range check, particular fields fall within specified ranges. Example, you cannot have negative inventories, right? So dili ka pwede mag-input og purchases negative 100. There is no such thing as a negative inventory. It's either there is an inventory or there is no inventory. It's either 0 or any positive number. Dili siya pwede negative. Then relationship check. Or you check in your relationship. So, kung unsa mo. Kining relationship check. So for example, if you want to encode interest expense in relation to a loans payable, i-check niya porsyento sa ato ang kung interest bearing ni siya nga loans payable, if this is 4% interest bearing, so dapat ang atong gi-record nga interest expense is also 4% of that. Okay, check ang relationship. Okay, and then transmission of transaction data, we have echo check. Echo check is transmitting data back to the originating terminal for comparison with the transmitting data. Kabantay mo anang if na may encode sa computer, i-process ninyo, okay, process, approve na, approve. Inighumanan na, ibalik na sa inyong monitor nga mauni imuhang gi-process nga kuan nga information. Echo siya in a sense nga ang imuhang gisod dito gibalik sa imuha for you to check kung sakto ba or dili. Then redundancy data check. This will check whether na-input na ba nimo sa una or wala pa. So kung na-input na nimo that is redundant, that should not be accepted by the computer. Then completeness check, verifying that all required data have been entered and transmitted. So kita mo na if mag-fill up mo for example of Google Forms, another asterisk, if you leave it blank, dili na i-accept. So that is part of your completeness check. So if this field is required, dapat naagid siya naagid kay gi-input din ha. Para walay tendency walay risk nga makalimtan niya og butang kana nga field. So that is completeness check. Okay, so those are four input controls. Again, for application controls, we have three: input, process, output. Katutanan natong hisgutan ganina for input to siya. Okay, for process controls, these are designed to provide reasonable assurance that transactions, including system-generated transactions, are properly processed by the computer. Transactions are not lost, added, excluded, duplicated, or improperly changed. Ka-experience mo nang marag na ay bug sa system ba? Na mag-input, unya paggawas, lahi na change sa inyong gi-input. So that error is not on the input side but on the processing side. So we have to make sure nga ang ato ang computer system, when they process our transactions, dapat walay mawala, ma-add, ma-exclude, ma-duplicate, and so on. Processing errors, that is rejected data and incorrect transactions, are identified and corrected on a timely basis such that if may error sa pag-process, dapat mo prompt dyan na siya sa ato ang screen para ma-remedy na dayon na siya diha dayon. Okay? Okay, so these are examples of process controls. We have manual cross-checks, processing logic tests, checks, run-to-run totals, file and program changes, audit trail linkages. These are not very kanang favorite sa mga examiners kaning part. So, based ako ang nabantayan, ang importante nga favorite kayo babalik-balikon is kaning sa input controls with respect to kaning part, kaning akong i-show, kani and this one. Una per me mabalik-balik sa mga exams. But for process controls, wala kaayo because di man gud niya siya makita nato as auditors. Di man siya makita. At least there is a input, makita nato nga mao man gid ang naa sa screen. But ang process control, it's in the background, naa sa sulod sa computer itself. So dili kay siya apparent. That's why dili pod kay ni siya favorite sa mga exams. Then output controls, these are designed to provide reasonable assurance that results or processing are accurate. Access to output is restricted to authorized personnel. So kinsa raman ang pwede maka-generate ani nga report, dapat kato lang authorized na mga employees. So for example, dapat ang isa ka employee dili siya maka-check sa payslip sa iyang kauban, 'di ba? So di ka pwede mag-generate og payslip diha with respect to other employees. So output controls are more of relating to the generation of reports. Are you authorized to generate this type of report? So muna siya ang sa output controls. Okay, audit approaches in a CIS environment. So we have this, kaan po ni kaning, important po ni siya nga date, nga information ha, kaning auditing around the computer and auditing through the computer. So when we say auditing around the computer, nakakita kag ikaw auditor ka ha, nakakita kag computer, di mo siya i-mind. Di mo i-mind iyang processing. Walang, imo siyang i-acknowledge nga ni-exist siya. Mo nang editing around the computer. But when you say auditing through the computer, imo yung i-test ang iyang processing and so on. Imo siyang ila-ilahon sa pagkasiya. Auditing around the computer, murabag imong i-judge ang person sa iharang dagway. Okay, inani ihang naong, gwapa siya, may siyang storya, no? But auditing through the computer, imo tanaw iyang values, kung sa tao pa, imo tanaw iyang values, iyang beliefs, kung sa importante para niya, imo siyang ila-ilahon. Okay, so ang kaning audit, sa una, ang buhaton na sa mga auditors, mostly, kaning auditing around the computer. Because, ato man pong i-acknowledge ang fact nga, dili sad kaayo ta maayo mo audit sa process itself because we are not IT experts, right? So most likely, we do auditing around the computer. But because of kung ano po kaayo, no, skillful and highly competent auditors nowadays, they can already do auditing through the computer. So when we speak of auditing around the computer, we call it the black box approach. Black box approach. Kumbaga, tan-awon nimo si computer. Imagine nun daw nimo, ano ba, para matiman-an nato, nga black box din yung auditing around. Tan-awon nimo ang computer, black ra gyud siya. So meaning, di ka makakita kung unsay sud niya. Kay black man siya, lisod tan-awon sa sulod. So ato na lang siyang i-audit on its face na lang. Auditing around the computer. We look at the computer as a black box in which we cannot see what's inside. So mo nang black box approach. Arriving at a conclusion through examining the internal control system for computer installation and the input and output only for application systems. So for black box, tanaw na nimo ang input and output. Under this approach, the auditor considers the computer as a black box, and as a result, the application system processing is not examined indirectly. So again, for black box approach, this is auditing around the computer. So ang tanawon lang nato is unsa atong gi-input o unsa ihatag nga output. Maora. But ang processing niya itself, dili na nato tan-awon. Okay? That's for black box. So this is black box approach. So we use a client input and then we encode the client input in the computer. Then tanaw na to ang output and compare it with our predetermined output. So for example, mag-input ta og sales invoice. Okay, sales invoice. Gamit jud ang actual sales invoice ha sa company. And then we compute it manually kung pila ang VAT niya. Okay, pila ang VAT niya. Ani nga kuan. Dapat ni ang amount sa VAT. So nanatay predetermined output, right? Pag input na to dira, pag gamit na to sa computer mo, try ta o gamit sa computer ni client. Inigamit na to sa iyang computer, tanaw na to ang output, atong i-compare sa ato ang own output. Is it the same? If yes, then the computer is operating correctly. So, maka-sure ta na walay errors with respect to this transaction. If there is a discrepancy, then we could say that the system is erroneous. So, that's black box approach. So when to use this approach? When to use black box approach? If any of the following is present. The system itself is very simple. The system is batch-oriented. And the system uses generalized software which is well-tested and used widely by many companies ni siya, sorry. Many companies. Sayo, giduka na guro ko. Many companies. So for example, if this software is well-tested, then we need not examine its processing function. What we need to examine is only the input and the output. We need not look at the processing function. Now, if you want to examine the processing function of the system itself, then we do auditing through the computer, which is also called a white box approach. So if we look at the computer as a white box, white man daw, dapat unta transparent box approach, no? But ano na lang, kung white box siya, maklaro nimo kung unsay sulod. So, tan-aw nimo ang iyang procedure, processing sa computer. So, we use the computer to test the logic and controls existing within the system and the records produced by the system. So, unsa may difference ani here, kaning sa ako ang i-present. In the black box approach, you use client's input. But for white box approach, you have to use your own input. So fictitious nga input, dummy inputs. Then we test how the computer processes kaning input, kaning dummy input, dummy or test data nga atong gigamit, and then we compare the output with our predetermined output. In that way, we can check whether the processing of the computer is correct or not. So when to use this? Mura magid siya exact opposite lang ni black box. We can use this if the system is complex. So kung katong black box, we can use it if the system is simple. Kung white box, if the system is complex. If the application system produces large volumes of inputs and produces large volumes of output because of cost-benefit considerations and significant parts. So, ang imuhang kailangan natin manan for white box and black box. Unsay difference niya, main difference niya, si black box, dili na mo concern itself on the processing but only on the input and the output. For white box, on the other hand, dili lang kay input and output but also on the processing aspect. And second distinction, for black box, what we use to encode is the client's input. And for white box, we use the auditor's input. Okay? We're almost there. Happy na tamahuman. Hang on. Okay, special techniques for auditing in a CIS environment. So special techniques, we are actually referring to computer-assisted audit techniques, CAATS. So we use this to help us conduct our audit. So CAATS involve the use of computers in the process of an audit rather than limiting it to an entirely manual approach. Again, I have mentioned a while ago na if your client is in a CIS environment, doesn't necessarily follow nga mag-CAATS jud ka. Okay? You can do manual audit approach even if your client is in or has a CIS environment. But you can also use CAAT or you can use a combination of both. So CAATs are defined as computer-based tools and techniques which facilitate auditors to increase their personal productivity as well as that of audit function. CAATs are software tools for auditors to access, analyze, and interpret data and to draw an opinion for an audit objective. So there are three types of CAATs. Generalized audit software, specialized audit software, and utility software. So kaning si 1 and 2, kaning nga mga softwares for audit lang gyud ni sila. Di ni mo pwede gamiton for other purposes. For audit purposes only. But the difference between the two, si generalized audit software, from the term itself general, applicable siya to all types of audit subjects. General kaayo siya. Specialized audit subjects, these are also referred to as purpose-written programs. This targets special aspects sa atong audit. Okay, but kanis lang duha, generalized audit software, specialized audit software, these are softwares that are intended for audit purposes only. Kaning utility software, number 3, dili gyud na siya initially audit software. So kaning utility software, any software na siya, any software nga dili unta for audit, but pwede gamiton nimo to conduct your audit. Example, Microsoft Excel. Excel, para audit ba dyan na siya? Dili man, di ba? Dili man siya intended for audit. But you can use it for your audit. So, it falls under number 3. Utility software. But kung ganahan ka og audit software, whether generalized or specialized, you need to also buy them or develop them internally. Mahal man ni sila. Mahal. So, kita kung low-key lang ta nga auditor, atong gamiton, kanin na lang utility software. Any other software nga dili unta for audit but you can also use for auditing purposes. Okay, so again, kani si number 1 and 2, paliton na nimo nga mga software. Paliton or kung di ka ganahan mo palit, magpahimo jud ka from your IT department. Okay, so audit procedures performed by your audit softwares. We can test client calculations, make additional calculations, extract data from the client files, and so on. So, pwede pod correspondence, kani nga mga audit softwares. Sila na mismo ang mo-generate og engagement letters, representation letters, attorney's letters. So, other CAATs, we have test data. Important po ni timan ininyo ang test data, kaning integrated test facility o parallel simulation. Kaya mao na ni ang last part sa atong discussion. Okay, test data. This is a set of dummy transactions developed by the auditor and processed by the client's computer programs to determine whether the controls which the auditor intends to rely on are functioning as expected. So if we use test data, masabtan naman no, test data, dummy ra na sila, dummy. Buhat-buhat tag transactions atua. Unya, atong gamiton ang system ni client to process kaning mga dummy transactions and then atong i-check kung sakto ba gyud pagka-process niya as expected. So if we use test data, unsa ka nga approach atong gigamit? Black box or white box? What do you think? White box, correct? White box. Because for black box, what we use as input are client's input, which is not a test data, correct? Ang test data, dapat kita ang naghimo ato ang own input as auditors. Okay. So we use this to determine whether the controls which we intend to rely on are functioning as expected. Then other concurrent audit techniques, ang pinaka-importante diri is kaning integrated test facility. This method introduces dummy transactions into a system in the midst of live transactions and is usually built into the system during the original design. So, unsay difference niya sa test data? Si test data and si ITF, the same siya in a sense nga dummy sila tanan. Okay? Pero ang nakalahian sa test data, ang dummy transactions will be processed not in combination with live transactions. So, kung dummy transactions lang jud ang ilahang i-process. Kani sa integrated test facility, integrated meaning combined. Ang dummy transactions, i-combine nila with the live transactions. When we say live transactions, mo na ang actual transactions. Na actual transactions si client, na kay dummy transactions, imo silang i-mix, niya i-process nimo sila together. And imong i-check kung mabantayan ba sa system ang imuhang mga dummy transactions inside na catch ba niya na segregate ba niya ang mga sayop nga transactions. Okay? And then kaning uban di ra kay ni favorite but ato lang pagian. Snapshots, the auditors embed software routines at different points within an application to capture and report images. So snapshots, more like snippets. Snapshots. So for example, before entering a new transaction, mag-snapshot sa si computer sa general ledger baron, and then pag input nimo ani nga another transaction, another snapshot para ma-compare nimo nga morning before, morning ang after. Mo na ang snapshots. Then system control audit review file or SCARF. This uses audit software embedded in the client system called an embedded audit module to gather information at predetermined points in a system. But this is very, very much complicated na kaya ang imuhang own CAATS, imong emerge sa system ni client. Okay. And then, this will be the last one, parallel simulation. This method processes actual client data through an auditor's software program. So, more siya og opposite, kumbaga, ni white box. Diba? Sa white box, ang sige nahitabo, imuhang own data, auditor's data, gi-process nimo sa client system. Correct? Ang kaning parallel simulation, manguha ka og client data, imong i-process imong own audit system as auditors. So, na client data. Okay, let's say money nga transaction. Nadira ang mga details. Gi-input nimo sa system ni client. The same details, imo sang gi-input sa imuhang own system as auditor. Tapos, parallel ilahang pag-process, and then imo i-compare unsay result dito sa client, unsay result sa imong audit software kung parehas ba. Okay? So that is parallel simulation. Okay, so that ends our discussion this afternoon. So atong i-recap ha. Unsay impact atong na-learn this afternoon is unsay impact sa CIS environment sa scope sa ato ang audit procedure. O ato pong na-learn, dapat clear na po na sa ato na regardless if manual or computerized, ang audit objective is the same. Kung sa gani atong objective as auditors, to ascertain whether there are material misstatements in the financial statements. The same lang yun ang ato ang objective, but ang atong approach is different. Okay, and then we learn two general approaches. We have the black box approach, the white box approach. Naka-learn po taon sa mga controls that are related to input, that are related to process, that are related to output. We also learned that we have two main types of controls, the general controls and the application controls. Okay, so when you restudy this topic, kaya na naman mo yung handouts. So for example, ini-graduate ninyo, tapos magtuon ra gihapon mo ana, di ba, for the for the board exam. Pagtanaw ninyo sa sa handout nako, side by side ninyo sa inyong CPA syllabus, board exam syllabus. Unya tan-awa dito under sa audit in CIS, asa nga part sa akong handout siya mo touch. Okay? Basta dapat i-sure na to kung makaya na kung naa magani 4 to 5 questions in related to audit in CIS, maansiran jud na nato siya, no, para makabawi ta sa katong mas lisod pa nga mga topics kung if ever masayop ta sa katong mga lisod na kaayo na topics. Kani siya di man siya lisod pero scary lang siya because entirely foreign sa ato ang naandan nga accounting, di ba? Sa accounting nato mga debit credit, compute, murag entirely foreign siya, mong scary siya. But if you get to know audit in CIS, ila-ilahon nimo siya, befriend nimo siya, tagaan po ganiya o easier time to kanang easy na lang nimo nga ila-ilahon siya, easier na lang nimo na i-recall siya. Okay, so just remember kato lang mga important nga mga terminologies and then practice retrieving the information that you have encoded and stored in your brain. Practice retrieving them from time to time if naamoy extra time. Okay?